There are stories that do not begin with thunder or triumph, but with something quieter, a breath of winter air, a memory softened by time, a single moment when the world seems to hold its light just a little differently. Sometimes beauty arrives this way, not bold, not loud, but gentle, like a hand resting on your shoulder when you need it most. And before the snow begins to fall, before silence settles into the corners of your heart, there is a stirring, a reminder that even in loss, something tender still survives. This is where our story opens, softly, delicately, with the faintest glow of hope beneath the cold. Snow drifted across the chapel courtyard in thin, hesitant threads. Not a storm, not even a flurry, just winter loosening its grip one fragile breath at a time. Each flake landed like a tired secret, melting the moment it touched the gray stone steps. The wet patches left behind glistened under the dull sky like tears the world couldn't quite commit to shedding. The iron fence wore a delicate white trimming as if dressed for a ceremony no one would attend. When I pushed open the chapel door, the hinges gave a long, weary sigh, a sound heavy with age, as if they remembered every widow who'd walked through before me. Inside, silence lay thick as wool. The air felt suspended, caught between warmth and cold, between presence and absence. It smelled faintly of old wood, of candle wax soaked into grain, and something else. Something metallic and mournful I had no name for. 40 chairs stood in rigid symmetry, each one perfectly aligned, each one perfectly empty. Even the stained glass windows cast muted colors. Reds that should have glowed like embers, blues that should have glimmered like rivers, all dulled by the weight of grief. It was the kind of quiet that makes a chest feel too small for the heart inside it. Then came the soft rhythm. Tack, tack, tack. Not loud, but impossibly clear. A sound alive enough to cut through the silence. Harper entered behind me, moving with the solemnity of someone who understood far more than a dog ought to. His golden fur, faded by age, held the glow of winter sunlight, soft waves of warmth in a place stripped of it. His face was carved with gentle years, silver tracing his muzzle, creases around his eyes that looked almost like wisdom. His ears drooped slightly now, not from weakness, but from a life spent listening, to Henry's voice, to late-night breaths, to quiet suffering. Those deep brown eyes, clouded at the edges but steady, lifted toward the coffin. He paused halfway down the aisle, stood perfectly still, and exhaled, a tiny sound, barely audible, but it trembled with recognition. It was the kind of exhale that seemed to say, I know, I remember, I miss him too. When he pressed against my leg, his warmth soaked straight into my bones. His breath came in slow, grounding waves, a living heartbeat in a room full of abandoned promises. His tail gave one soft sway, low and reverent, a gesture of quiet condolence. Every movement spoke with clarity. I'm here. I won't leave. You're not alone. My fingers trembled around the funeral program. The paper felt thinner than it should have, fragile, like grief had pulled the weight out of it. My hands looked older today, more my mother's than mine. I wasn't sure when that had happened. I am May Henderson, 71 years old, widow as of 43 hours ago, though time had stopped meaning much. The black wool coat Henry bought me 3 Christmases ago hung loose around my shoulders, like it no longer recognized the woman inside it. I'd lost weight over months, not the kind anyone celebrates. The kind carved out by late-night worry and long mornings spent in a house that echoed too loudly. Even the lavender scent on my scarf, the one Henry said smelled like home, felt unfamiliar today. Homesickness for a home that no longer existed. The front row chair creaked under me, a jarringly alive sound in a room dedicated to the dead. I smoothed my dress out of habit, the way I always did when Henry used to tease me for fussing. Harper leaned gently against my shin, his warmth grounding me in a moment, determined to unspool me. On the small table beside the guest book sat an unopened envelope addressed to me. Jennifer's handwriting, neat, perfect, cold. They didn't come, didn't call. Just a text at 11:47 p.m. Mom, we're really busy. We'll visit soon. Soon, a word that stretches until it snaps. The envelope contained printed condolences prepared by the funeral home for families too busy to grieve personally. Mass-produced sympathy, disposable compassion. I placed my fingertips on it and felt nothing. Not anger, not sadness, just the hollow space where those things should have been. Harper felt it instantly. His head lifted, eyes locked on mine. Breathing matched to my own, as if he were calibrating himself to my heartbeat. Pastor Raymond stood near the pulpit, hands folded, expression polite but distant. He had met Henry once. 15 minutes. Long enough to officiate, not long enough to care. A funeral staff member checked his watch, eyes wandering to the window as if the sky held something more important than the man in the coffin. Another adjusted flowers by millimeters, performing grief the way one adjusts props on a stage. Everyone belonged to the living world. Except Harper. He alone belonged to Henry and to me. He knew the man in the coffin, loved him, remembered him. The rest were here because their jobs required them to be. The pastor began. We gather here today to celebrate. Celebrate. The word hit wrong, sharp, hollow. I barely heard the rest. Harper's warmth pressed into my side, his head settling gently on my knee with a weight that felt like purpose. His breath grazed my leg in slow, steady pulses. Breathe. You're here. I'm here. Breathe. 40 seats, 3 bodies, 1 heart that mattered. In that hollow chapel, with its empty rows and its heavy silence, Harper felt more human than any human present. And for one fragile moment, in the quiet shape of his loyalty, I felt something soften inside me. Not healed, not mended, but simply not alone. Thomas's office smelled of old paper and eucalyptus. A quiet collision of ages, the weight of documents that had lived too long, and the soft, medicinal breath of a diffuser trying to soothe a room that had seen too many human fractures. The third-floor window behind his desk held a sky pressed low and heavy, winter gray and waiting, its reflection wavy through the warped old glass, as if the world outside were Shifton's underwater. Floor-to-ceiling shelves crowded the walls, dark cherry wood, saturated with decades of legal dust. Row after row of leather spines, family disputes, severed trusts, fragile reconciliations, all archived in orderly silence. Thomas's desk sat in the middle of it all, a massive century-old witness to decisions that had broken hearts and restored others. Its polished surface glowed under a green banker's lamp, a warm circle of light anchoring us in a room otherwise thick with pause. At my feet sat Harper, steady, warm, present. He leaned gently against my ankle, reading me the way he once read Henry on those disoriented nights at 3 a.m. when time slipped from his grasp like water. Harper didn't move, but the whole shape of his body said, I'm here. Just breathe. His calm breathing created a rhythm in the room, a kind of living metronome guiding me through the tension tightening my shoulders, the way my fingers clenched the leather armrests a little too tightly. A lighthouse in a storm made of paper. Thomas slid a stack of documents toward me. The paper whispered across the wood, a soft, fragile sound that echoed more loudly in my chest than in the room. His hands, marked by age and work and a lifetime of delivering difficult truths, rested on the desk with a deliberate stillness. "Are you sure about the changes, May?" His voice was gentle, layered with professionalism and something like old affection. The memory of a family he'd known long before it began to fall apart. I didn't answer at once. Instead, I turned each page slowly, feeling the weight of every number, every date, every small betrayal printed in ink. Bank statements, wire transfers, tuition receipts for schools I had only seen in photographs, credit card charges circled in Thomas's precise handwriting. $847. Luxury resort, Cancun, $1,200. Designer handbags, $650. Wine tasting tour. All purchased within days of begging for emergency help. 23 requests in 1 year. $267,000. Not one visit, not one call that wasn't a request. Each page felt like a thin blade. Paper cuts across the heart, sharp, small, but deeply felt. Harper noticed first. He sensed the tightening of my breath, the tremor beneath my ribs, the subtle shift in the air around my body. He moved closer, slowly, intentionally, and rested his head on my foot. Not beside it, on it, a small weight to keep me anchored. "You're not reading this alone." Thomas waited. The pendulum clock on the wall counted each second with a steady, patient tick. A reminder that time would move forward whether I felt ready or not. Somewhere outside, a siren rose and faded into the city's winter hush. "May," Thomas said softly, "we can still proceed with the original will. You don't have to." "No." The word left me sharper than I intended. Harper's ears twitched, but he didn't lift his head. I touched the margin of page 7. Henry's own handwriting, written when his hands were still steady enough to hold a pen. "They've forgotten what family means." Harper never did. The letters were uneven, but the meaning was unmistakable. "He knew," I whispered. "He knew before I did." Thomas nodded, removing his glasses to polish them. A small grace he offered to clients when they needed a moment to gather themselves. "Henry was very clear," he said. "He made the amendments 3 months before he passed. Sound mind. Psych evaluation is in the file, page 18. "They'll fight it," I murmured. "They will," he confirmed gently. I looked down at Harper. His eyes were half closed now, his breathing deep and slow, a dog's version of quiet resolve. "I want to do it," I said. "May, I want to do every word he asked for." A silence settled, not heavy, but final. Thomas nodded once, then turned the last page toward me. Henry's amended will. Thick paper, embossed seal. The weight of a life reshaped. The fountain pen felt heavier than it should have, but when I signed, May Elizabeth Henderson, the ink flowed steady and dark. Harper exhaled softly, a warm pulse over my shoe. A confirmation, a blessing, a beginning. 5 days after the signing, at 4:47 p.m., the doorbell rang. I was washing dishes, warm water, slow thoughts, the kind of quiet chore that steadies the mind. Harper lifted his head before the bell finished chiming. He stood with sudden purpose, tail rising, ears forward. Not alarm, recognition. Someone good was on the other side. Through the frosted glass, a tall silhouette waited, arms holding something close. When I opened the door, snow drifted around Ethan, his dark hair dusted white, his green eyes rimmed with fatigue and something tender. "Hi, May," he said softly. Harper pushed past me, pressing himself against Ethan's leg with a joy too deep for speed. A slow, sweeping wag of the tail that belonged only to the people he loved without hesitation. "Hey, buddy," Ethan's voice broke as he knelt. He set the casserole down on one knee and buried a hand in Harper's fur. Harper leaned in, full weight, full trust, and released a soft, emotional whine. Recognition, grief, love, all wrapped into one quiet sound. "I'm sorry I couldn't make the funeral," Ethan said, standing with effort. "I was in Alaska, no cell service. I didn't find out until days later. I'm so sorry, May." "Come in," I said, and with those words, the entire house felt warmer, as if someone had opened a window in my chest. Ethan set the casserole down, and Harper followed him like a shadow, settling between us at the kitchen table, head resting now on Ethan's foot, the same offer of comfort he had given me. We talked of Henry, of summers on the deck, of bad jokes and unfinished projects, of Alaska winds and long winters. We didn't speak Jennifer's or Michael's names. Silence did that for us. Outside, snow thickened. Inside, the kettle hummed, and Harper slept in the warm glow of two people who had loved the same man in different but honest ways. A bridge between what was lost and what might still be found. A reminder that loyalty, true loyalty, never leaves. It only waits to be recognized again. Celia arrived 3 days after I signed the papers. Not as a visitor, not as a daughter, but as a storm front moving in without warning. She didn't knock. She entered, the door swinging wide and slamming shut with a violence that felt personal. The noise shot through the quiet house, rattling the frames on the wall, as if even the memories inside them flinched. Harper lifted his head instantly, ears forward, muscles taut, body rising in one slow, steady motion. Not out of aggression, out of awareness, out of instinct. I placed my coffee cup down, the tiny clink almost swallowed by the tension gathering in the air. "Mom?" Celia's voice cracked through the hallway, sharp, brittle, like someone trying to hold anger and hurt in the same breath and failing. When I reached the living room, she was standing there in the center of the rug, like a storm cloud condensed into human form. Her hair was pulled back so tightly it sharpened her features, stretched them into something rigid and unforgiving. In her hand was the letter, the one from Thomas's office, crumpled from her grip. "Is this a joke?" She shook the paper hard, as if shaking it could rattle me. Harper moved between us before I said a word, placing himself with the certainty of someone who had seen anger before and knew exactly where he belonged. "Celia?" "Don't." She cut through my attempt like a blade. "Don't Celia me. Do you hear yourself? You're leaving everything to a dog?" Her voice rose, not out of confusion, but disbelief sharpened into accusation. It filled the room, leaving no corner untouched. "Your father made that decision," I said. She laughed, sharp, humorless. "He was dying, Mom. He was drugged. He didn't know what he wanted." "He knew exactly what he wanted." My voice surprised her. It surprised me too. Quiet but heavy, a tone I'd never used with her in 43 years. Harper leaned into my leg, not trembling, not unsure, anchoring me. "You are not seriously doing this," she said, her voice cracking. "I am." I'm your daughter. A plea slipped into her tone without permission. Then you should have come to his funeral, I said. Silence. A full second, maybe two. A silence that hit harder than any screaming would have. You were in Cancun. The truth landed neatly, with no apology and no decoration. How did you? She stopped, swallowed hard, then lowered her voice. We needed that vacation. You don't know how stressful my life is. I know. I funded most of it. A flush climbed her neck. That's not fair, she whispered. Isn't it? Harper didn't growl, didn't bark, but he watched her with eyes older than his years, steady, unfaltering. Celia stared at the document again. You're leaving us nothing. Nothing. You'll receive exactly what you gave your father at the end, I said. Nothing. The word hung between us, solid, cold, irrevocable. Her face hardened. You'll regret this. She turned, heels striking the floor like snapping twigs, but paused at the door and looked, not at me, but at Harper. When he dies, she said, cold as winter stone, you'll have nothing left. The door slammed, harder than her entrance. Harper came to my side immediately, climbed onto the couch with a gentleness that contradicted the violence of the moment, and rested his head on my lap. Warm, steady, present. I placed my hand on his fur, felt the heat of him, felt the loyalty of him, felt the difference between family by blood and family by heart. Peter didn't slam the door. He knocked, 3 light taps, which somehow carried more threat than Celia's shouting. He arrived with Miranda, her perfect hair unmoving despite the wind outside. She smelled faintly of citrus and expensive skincare. A woman prepared for every room except this one. Harper sat like a quiet sentinel near the fireplace, eyes tracking every motion, understanding more than they realized. Mom? Peter said gently, slipping into that practiced tone he used on wealthy clients. We're concerned. Harper lifted his head, a single slow movement, measuring him. And, Peter continued, we think you might be making choices out of grief. I'm honoring your father, I said. Miranda leaned forward, voice soft and polished. May, we're worried about your future. That's admirable, I replied. But your future was all you worried about when your father was dying. A ripple of silence shook the room. Peter's face stiffened. Miranda's calculating eyes flicked from the piano to the antique clock to the bookshelves, as if mentally tabulating each item's worth. And then Harper stood, slow, purposeful, a line drawn in golden fur. He walked to me, laid down at my feet, his eyes never leaving them. A message without words. This far. No further. Peter exhaled sharply, a frustrated breath he tried to disguise as concern. You can't expect a dog to take care of you, he said. I expect nothing from Harper, I answered. He's already given more than either of you. Color climbed Peter's neck. Miranda touched his arm gently. Let's go, she murmured. At the door, Peter turned back, eyes cold, voice stripped of all softness. When you need us, don't call. The door closed softly. Softly always hurts more. Harper climbed onto the couch again, Henry's old spot, and rested his head on my lap. Warm weight, steady breath, an unspoken promise. I'm here. I stay. For the first time since Henry died, I cried into Harper's fur without apology. He didn't move, didn't shift, just absorbed it, as if grief were something he was built to carry. Spring didn't arrive as a season. It arrived as a feeling, a softness in the soil, a faintness of green, a loosening of the world's grip on cold. Harper felt it first. He always did. He sniffed the air with a curiosity that belonged to younger dogs, tail swaying gently behind him as if greeting the season personally. Then Ethan's truck pulled in. Harper's whole body lit up, tail sweeping the ground, ears lifting, a soft whine escaping him like joy breaking at the seams. Ethan stepped out with lumber in his arms, sunlight catching the lines of his face. "Thought we'd get the yard ready," he said. Harper pressed into him, head tucked under Ethan's hand, his tail wagging in slow, grateful arcs. Watching them together made something in my chest loosen, a place where loneliness had been living too long. Cherry blossoms drifted across the evening sky like slow, thoughtful snow. The world glowed pink and gold, soft and forgiving. Harper came to me on the porch, steps measured, presence calm, carrying the quiet wisdom of an old friend who knows the right moment to speak without words. He placed his head on my knee, looked up at me with those deep brown eyes that had memorized every version of me. The grieving me, the angry me, the tired me. "Do I look okay now?" I whispered. Harper blinked. Slow, certain, then leaned more of his weight against my leg, the gentlest affirmation. "Yes, you finally do." A single cherry petal landed on his back, pink against gold, soft as forgiveness. That night, choosing myself. For the first time since the funeral, the house felt quiet without feeling empty. Harper slept near my bed, his breathing deep and steady, a rhythm that grounded the room, made it whole. In that quiet, I understood something simple and profound. Family isn't blood. Family is who stays. And Harper, with his gentle eyes, his steady breath, his unwavering presence, had stayed through every storm. I closed my eyes, let the grief fall away in slow layers, and allowed myself peace. Real peace. Hard-earned, softly held, finally mine. Spring had begun the healing. But summer made it undeniable. It didn't come with celebration. It came with shifts so soft they were almost invisible. The way the morning air stopped biting, the way shadows grew shorter at noon, the way birdsong sounded brave again. Sunlight found corners of the house it hadn't touched since Henry died. Golden beams stretched across floors and walls, as if warming a home that had held its breath too long. The breeze entering through opened windows carried new scents: cut grass, jasmine, honeysuckle. Life signs, alive signs. Harper sensed it before I did. He moved through the house with less hesitation, as though the rooms themselves were softening. He lingered in warm patches of morning light, tilting his face upward, letting the glow rest on his aging fur like a benediction. His tail wags, small, quiet, deliberate, seemed to say, "We made it. Winter is over." And for the first time in a long time, I believed him. The room I had feared most was Henry's old workshop. For months, I kept that door closed, unable to face the frozen remains of a life interrupted. Unfinished wood projects, dull pencils, notes scribbled in a rush, a calendar forever paused at March. When I finally pushed open the window, the frame groaned, a sound both mechanical and strangely emotional. The stale air stirred, mixing old sawdust with the sweet scent of summer outside. Light spilled in, softening the room's edges, erasing its stillness. Not a tomb, not anymore. Harper appeared at the doorway, hesitating only for a breath. Then, stepping inside, the first time since Henry left us. He walked to Henry's stool and sat beside it, just as he had when Henry worked for hours, dropping treats into sawdust for Harper to find. He pressed his chin against my leg. The room shifted, The air changed, and for one miraculous moment, Henry's warmth felt close enough to touch. The scent of wood, the golden fur brushing my knee, sunlight painting dust in the air like tiny blessings. Grief and healing overlapped in a single, quiet second. I placed my hand on Harper's head. "Thank you," I whispered, "for coming in here with me." His tail swept the floor in a slow, steady answer. Ethan kept showing up, not out of obligation, out of instinct. A quiet human instinct to help someone still learning how to stand again. Sometimes he brought tools, a hammer, sandpaper, oil for squeaky hinges. Sometimes fruit from the market. Sometimes nothing but himself and the simple admission, I wanted to see Harper. Whenever he arrived, Harper changed. He grew younger, brighter, more alive. Even his stiff joints seemed to forget pain for a while. Ethan would kneel, always kneel, until he was eye to eye with Harper, burying his hands in that aging golden fur. "You know," he told me once as he trimmed the garden, "dogs like Harper, they stay until the person they love is safe again. Not many can do that." I pretended to keep weeding, but his words struck deeper than he realized. He wasn't talking only about Harper. He was talking about me, how I had survived Henry's long goodbye, how I had kept breathing through seasons that tried to suffocate everything warm inside me. Later that week, we repainted Henry's old rocking chair, peeling blue replaced with a color like early morning sky. "This place feels alive again," Ethan said quietly, not stuck, not waiting. It was an ordinary sentence, but something in me trembled. Am I really living again? Harper lay beside me, breathing slow and sure. His presence felt like an answer. Yes, this gentle rebuilding was life. Under summer sun, Harper's fur glowed like ripened wheat. But time had begun its quiet work. He still followed me everywhere, still watched me with those soft, loyal eyes. But his legs shook slightly when he rose, and sometimes he paused halfway up the stairs, gathering strength. He slept more, dreamed deeper, leaned into me longer. He never asked for help, never sought pity. He carried his aging with the kind of dignity only a dog who has loved deeply can possess. I knew what he was doing. He was trying to stay strong for me. The same way he had all winter. One afternoon under the oak tree, I rested my hand on his warm head. "Harper," I whispered, "it's okay. You don't have to be strong anymore. I'm not alone now." His eyes softened, glistened. Then he closed them and leaned his full weight against me, more than he had in months. It felt like a surrender, a thank you, a release. The breeze slowed, birdsong softened, and for one suspended moment, summer wrapped around us like a blessing. Rain fell softly the day I found Henry's letter. It was tucked in the back of his desk drawer, my name written across the envelope in handwriting that wavered only at the edges. Harper appeared beside me, sitting so close our shoulders touched. No words, just presence, just permission. I opened the letter. Henry's voice filled the room. "Don't pause your life just because you spent so long taking care of mine. You won't be alone. Harper will see to that. And one day, you'll warm someone else's life too. I'm sad I won't see your new seasons, but you, May, will come alive again." I held the paper against my heart as Harper rested his head in my lap. Love and grief met, refused to cancel each other out, and instead created something new, something like courage. "He knew," I whispered. "He knew exactly what I'd need." Harper's tail brushed the floor. He always knew. That night, I slept with the window open for the first time. The breeze carried jasmine and cool air through the room. Curtains fluttered like slow breaths. Harper slept at my bedside, curved into a peaceful shape, his breathing steady and reassuring. I lay awake for a while, gathering the pieces of my summer. Henry's words, Ethan's kindness, Harper's unwavering devotion, and the quiet rebirth happening inside me. And I understood something simple and profound. If Harper had been the one who witnessed the last winter, the one who stayed through the coldest parts of grief, then I was the one who must now live the new summer. Not perfectly, not fearlessly, just honestly. I whispered, Harper, thank you. You got me through the winter. Now, I'll try to live my summer. His tail flicked in his sleep. I smiled. Sleep came gently, unafraid, full of breath instead of ache. And from that night on, I began to live again. Not the life I had before, but the life that was waiting after winter. A life warm enough to grow in. A life Harper had kept safe for me. A life that, finally, I wanted. By late summer, Harper moved as if he were listening to something I couldn't hear. Not pain, not fear, but time itself. His steps grew slower, not hesitant, but deliberate, as though he no longer rushed through the world, but wished to understand each moment fully before letting it pass. He paused before climbing the porch steps, lifting one paw in the air and holding it there, as if the world beneath him needed to settle before he continued. He stood longer in the yard, nose raised to the wind, eyes soft, body still, feeling the world more deeply in those seconds than I had in years. Sometimes 10 seconds passed, sometimes 20, but he didn't look confused or lost. He looked present, like an elder who had finally learned to savor the silence. His joints trembled now when he pushed himself up from lying down, a subtle quiver that revealed what he never spoke. But he never complained, not in a whimper, not in a sigh. Harper had dignity even in decline. He still followed me, not closely at my heels anymore, but always within a few steps, his eyes gently tracking me through the house. He still stopped whenever I stopped, still watched my face to understand my mood, still lifted his ears at my voice like a vow he'd taken years ago and never once reconsidered. His body slowed. His devotion never did. And watching him age didn't break me the way I'd feared. It humbled me. It felt like witnessing a long, loyal life stepping softly toward its final chapters, with grace instead of fear. Harper wasn't fading. He was transforming, becoming something quieter, deeper, a soul made of patience and warm breath. Autumn settled over the house the way dusk settles over a quiet room, softly, without drama, but unmistakably. Leaves spiraled down in slow dances. The sun took its time crossing the sky. The air carried wood smoke, ripened apples, and the bittersweet scent of endings. Harper loved it. His golden coat glowed under autumn light, the edges slightly silver now. His eyes clouded just a little, but the warmth behind them grew stronger, deepened. We didn't walk far anymore, but each walk had more meaning than the miles we once covered. Harper stopped often, to sniff the air, to feel sunlight, to simply exist in the quiet beauty of the season. And I learned to stop with him. One October afternoon, under a sky so blue it felt unreal, Harper suddenly halted mid-walk. No noise, no danger, no scent. He simply lifted his face to the wind. The breeze caught his fur, ruffling the long hairs around his neck. His eyes closed, not out of strain, but intention. as if he was listening to something ancient and gentle, as if the wind was telling him secrets only old souls understood. He breathed in deeply, slow, measured, peaceful, and in that moment I realized Harper wasn't withdrawing from the world. He was becoming part of it. Age didn't shrink him, it expanded him, made him more connected to every leaf, every sound, every moment of quiet existence. When he opened his eyes again and looked at me, there was a kind of peace I had never seen in him before, and we walked home slowly, carrying that peace between us like a shared blanket. Winter arrived with frost painting delicate silver on the windows. But unlike the brutal winter that had shattered our lives years ago, the winter that had taken Henry, this winter held no knives. This winter held us. Harper curled beside the fireplace each evening, as close to the heat as he could manage without discomfort. The firelight turned his coat into molten gold, the glow deepening with each breath he took. He looked like an old guardian spirit resting after years of faithful service. I knitted next to him, or read, or simply listened to the soft rise and fall of his breathing. A steady rhythm that felt more comforting than any music. Silence, once terrifying, had become a companion. Harper no longer rose to follow me every time I stood. His body couldn't do that anymore. Instead, I went to him, every time, and each time he lifted his tail once, slow, deliberate, a small but profound greeting that said, "I'm still here. I'm still yours." There was no sadness in that change, only tenderness, only gratitude. We had learned each other's rhythms so completely that even silence felt like conversation. Ethan visited every Saturday, even as the days grew short and cold. At first, he came to tend the garden. Then he came for Harper. And eventually, he came for us. Harper could no longer run to the door, but he always sat up when he heard Ethan's truck, tail sweeping the floor in slow, emotional arcs. And every time Ethan knelt beside him and whispered, "Hey, old boy, I'm here." Harper breathed in deeply, then exhaled with a sigh so soft, so full of recognition and love, that it never failed to tighten something inside my chest. Their bond was a thread connecting past and present, a quiet promise that some relationships weather every storm, every season, every change. Sometimes they watched television together. Sometimes they just sat, Ethan's hand resting on Harper's fur, Harper's head resting on Ethan's knee. They needed nothing more. Presence was enough. On December 28th, snow blanketed the world in a pristine white sheet. Quiet, unspoiled, waiting. Harper looked at the front door with a familiar longing. "You want a walk?" I asked, a single tail wag, slow but certain. We bundled up and stepped outside, the cold air biting but beautiful. The snow made a soft, delicate crunch beneath our feet, a sound that always felt like stepping into memory. Harper's footprints were shallow now, drag marks between them showing where his legs no longer lifted high. But each print felt like a message, a gentle note written in snow. "I am still here." We walked only 50 yards, maybe 40, but the distance didn't matter. What mattered was that we walked together. At one point, Harper turned, pressed his face gently against my leg, and looked up with eyes that held decades of devotion. "You walked me through every winter," I whispered, "and every spring." His tail moved once, a soft answer. "And you walked me through mine." I knelt in the snow and held him, feeling his breath, his warmth, his life. It was not a goodbye. It was gratitude made physical. That night, Harper lay beside my bed under the fleece blanket he had stolen from Henry years ago. He curled into it the way elders wrap themselves in memories. I stroked his head, tracing familiar contours, feeling warmth beneath thinning fur. "Harper, thank you," I whispered, "for saving me, for staying, for every season we survived together." His eyes closed, then opened once more, slow, intentional, as if he wanted to see me clearly one more time. His tail moved, just the tip, soft as breath. It said everything. "I know, and I love you too." His breathing deepened, slowed, settled into the steady rhythm of peaceful sleep. The house glowed with quiet warmth, not from the fire, but from every memory we had built, every storm weathered, every silent moment shared. It wasn't an ending, it was a perfect chapter, a gentle completion. Two hearts resting at the edge of winter, together, exactly where they were meant to be. The morning after our last walk, I woke to a brightness that felt impossible. Winter had not loosened its grip yet, but the world looked newly washed, as if someone had wiped the sky clean overnight. Light filled the room in slow golden shapes, settling across the floor like warm breath. The snow outside shimmered with a delicate crystalline glow, each ice crystal burning briefly like a tiny star. I turned toward Harper. I expected him to be asleep. He had been so tired after yesterday that I'd checked his breathing twice through the night, but he was awake. Slowly, deliberately, he lifted his head and turned toward the window, letting the morning light touch his face. He didn't rise quickly anymore. Those days were long gone. But his eyes were bright, clear, alive. Inside that aging body, a small flame of life was still insisting, "Not yet. I'm still here. This isn't the last of me." "Good morning, Harper." At my voice, his tail moved once, twice. Quiet, intentional motions that carried more meaning than a bark or a leap ever could. He walked into the patch of sunlight, stood there as it gilded his fur, and closed his eyes. It felt like grace. This moment, this warmth, this old dog refusing to dim quietly. And I understood I was being given one more day that I hadn't expected. One more morning to pay attention. That afternoon, just as the sun warmed the living room enough for me to crack open the window, a soft, careful knock sounded at the front door. 2 taps, gentle, hopeful. Harper lifted his head again, not startled, just attentive, curious. When I approached the door, he rose too, painfully, methodically, and fell into step beside me the way he always had. On the other side of the door stood a small boy and his mother. The boy looked fragile, thinner than children his age should be, his skin pale in the way of those who have spent too many months under hospital lights. But his eyes, they were fiercely bright, filled with a hope that made my breath stutter. "Is this where Harper lives?" His question trembled in the cold air, carried on a mix of shyness and yearning. "How do you know Harper?" I asked softly. The boy reached into his small backpack and pulled out a worn sheet of paper, soft at the creases from being folded dozens, perhaps hundreds of times. It was a photo Ethan had taken last summer. Harper sitting in the garden at golden hour, eyes half closed, fur glowing, the very picture of peace. Beneath it, in a child's slow, careful handwriting, "When things hurt at the hospital, this dog helped me keep going." My heart clenched. The boy's mother spoke quietly, her voice gently cracked from overuse, from worry, from sleepless nights. My son was very sick. Some days he didn't want to keep fighting. But he looked at this picture before every treatment. It calmed him. He'd tell himself, "If this dog can be this peaceful, Maybe I can get through today. The boy swallowed, then whispered, "Could I pet him? Just once?" I glanced at Harper, and Harper, dear wise Harper, walked forward without hesitation, not cautiously, not reluctantly, as if the boy had been waiting for him and he had finally arrived. The boy knelt, snow soaking into his jeans, and Harper lowered his head into the child's trembling hands. The boy's face broke into quiet wonder. "He's real," he whispered, voice cracking with joy. "He's really real." His mother cried silently behind him. And in that moment, with Harper resting peacefully at the arms of a child he had saved without ever knowing it, I realized something simple and enormous. Miracles aren't loud. They don't announce themselves. They are quiet moments when winter eases its grip and someone's hope finds a place to land. Harper had protected another person's winter, simply by being himself. That evening, Ethan delivered a letter the boy's mother had asked him to bring. It was written on hospital stationery, the lines carefully printed in the unsteady handwriting of a recovering child. "Dear Grandma May, after meeting Harper, I wanted to live again. Some days at the hospital were so scary I didn't know if I could keep going. But I had Harper's picture. When he smiled, I forgot I was sick for a little while. When I get completely better, I want to walk with him. A real walk. The winter Harper protected became my miracle too. You have the best dog in the whole world. Love, Timothy." I pressed the letter to my chest, feeling its small weight like another heartbeat beneath my hands. Harper lay beside me on the floor, breathing gently, every inhale and exhale a quiet song that had carried so many people through their darkest days. "Henry, Ethan, Timothy, me. You saved another life," I whispered, my hand resting on his head. Harper's eyes fluttered open, looked at me, and softened. He understood. Of course he did. And he sighed, a peaceful, accepting sigh, as if to say, "This is what I was meant to do." No one expected it. Not the vet, not me. But Harper lived to see another spring. Softly, quietly, miraculously. By March, the snow had begun to shrink into the shadows. Crocuses pushed their heads through cold earth. Birdsong returned to mornings that had been silent for months. And Harper was still here. Smaller now, slower, his fur nearly all white, each movement requiring intention and effort. But alive, present, still choosing each day. One afternoon, I found him sitting in the yard in a patch of gentle sunlight. The breeze carried the scent of thawing soil and new life beginning. Harper lifted his face into the wind, a soft, serene expression spreading across it. The kind of expression that made time feel slower, as if even the world didn't want to disturb him. I sat beside him. "Harper, you kept someone alive this winter." His ear flicked. "And you opened someone else's spring." His mouth twitched upward, a tiny, quiet smile, one only I would recognize, and I understood. The miracle didn't happen to Harper. It happened through him and onto all of us who loved him. In late April, when the world had turned green again, Timothy returned. He looked stronger, cheeks fuller, eyes brighter, steps more confident. But he still carried the photo. We took the walk he had dreamed of. Slow steps, a short distance, maybe 200 feet. But to Timothy, walking beside Harper was everything. "This is what I imagined," he whispered. "I saw this in my head every day at the hospital, and now it's real." Harper moved slowly, steadily, quietly savoring each step. When Timothy knelt beside him and said softly, "When I'm with you, it doesn't hurt as much," Harper answered, in the only way he could. A gentle lick on the boy's hand, warm, deliberate, loving. Ethan watched from the porch, eyes shining. "May," he said, voice thick. "If this isn't a miracle, what is?" I couldn't speak. I could only watch. Boy and dog, winter and spring, healing and hope, all walking together under a soft April sky. When Timothy finally left, Harper returned inside, exhausted but peaceful. A soul who had fulfilled his purpose fully, beautifully, without ever seeking recognition. I sat beside him, my hand on his side, feeling the gentle rise and fall of his breath. "Thank you," I whispered, "for everything, for every life you touched, for every winter you protected." His tail moved once against the blanket, a tiny motion, but in it I heard the truth. It wasn't work, it was love, and love is always worth it. The house still held him, not as a ghost, no flickering shadows, no strange noises in the dark, no mystical presence lingering in corners. It held him in the quiet way only a long-loved home can hold someone. In textures, in light, in the small indentations that outlive their makers. The cushion he favored still carried the gentle hollow of his body. A faint depression in a faded burgundy pillow Henry had once bought at a yard sale. No matter how I fluffed it, how I tried to restore its shape, it always settled back into Harper's silhouette, as if the fibers had learned him and refused to forget. The patch of carpet where he slept every afternoon, precisely where the sunlight landed warmest, remained pressed, the fibers permanently parted, a tender shadow of habit, a memory shaped in fabric. Even the doorframe bore him, barely there wear at the height of his shoulder, a signature carved not by intention, but by existence, by the thousands of times he passed through that threshold. And every morning, at 7:23, as if the rotation of the earth still honored him, the first beam of sunlight fell exactly, perfectly, on the spot where he once slept. I would sit with my coffee, watching that beam illuminate nothing but empty air, yet feeling something present, something warm, as though absence itself had become a kind of presence. Harper hadn't disappeared. He had simply become quieter, a soft echo instead of a sound, a feeling instead of a form, a warmth instead of a weight. And in that gentle warmth, I learned something essential. Grief and gratitude are not opposites, they are twins. They coexist in the same heartbeat. The house didn't haunt me with what I'd lost. It comforted me with what he'd given. Timothy came back in early summer, actually running, across the lawn. Healthy, whole, alive in a way that made the world pause to take notice. "Grandma May!" he yelled, breathless with joy. "The doctor said I can run again. I can do everything." His laughter scattered across the yard like light. His mother trailed behind, not exhausted, not fearful, but radiant. The kind of radiance born only from relief, so deep it becomes gratitude. Timothy found Harper's leash on the porch. Old leather, worn smooth, metal clips dulled from years of use. He lifted it the way others might lift a relic. Then he rolled up his sleeve, an arm once covered with IV marks, now tanned and strong. "This is the leash that saved me," he whispered. The world stilled, not because the leash had magic, but because it had meaning. It had given him a future to fight toward. It had tethered him to hope. He looked up, eyes damp but bright. "I'm going to be a veterinarian, so I can help dogs like Harper, so other kids like me can have something to hold on to. a boy who should have died now planning a life of saving others. Harper's first legacy wasn't memory, it was survival. The survival of someone who would carry the ripple forward for decades. And in that moment, the truth settled softly. Harper hadn't saved one winter of my life. He had saved a lifetime for someone else. The garden had grown into a small wilderness. Not chaotic, but abundant, as though every flower had taken a vow to bloom for him. Hollyhocks towering like sentinels. Hydrangeas heavy with color. Roses clustering in soft explosions of red and gold. And along the narrow path Harper always walked, tiny depressions shaped by his paws had become the most fertile ground. Plants sprouted there first, crocuses, daffodils, forget-me-nots we never planted. Ethan knelt one morning, hands stained with earth. "It's strange," he murmured. "Everything grows better where he walked." I smiled. Harper always carried life wherever he went. When the afternoon wind moved through the garden, the leaves rustled in a way that sounded eerily like whispering. He was here, and he still is. And in that gentle music, I understood. Love doesn't merely remain, it returns, in petals, in soil, in color, in breath. Ethan never missed a Saturday. Long after Harper was gone, he still arrived at 9 a.m. each week, tools in hand, purpose in his step. He fixed what needed fixing, tended what needed tending. A loose hinge, a thirsty lily, a wobbly fence board. Every task ended with the same quiet sentence. Harper would have done this too. Not in sorrow, not in longing, in remembrance, in gratitude. Saturdays became holy, a ritual of care, a ceremony of continuity. A bridge Harper had built between two people who might never have met otherwise. In the shadow of grief, a new branch of family grew, not replacing what was lost, but honoring it through continuation. Harper's second legacy was connection, the simple, sacred act of showing up for someone week after week after week. One soft May evening, I sat on the porch watching the sky turn impossible shades of pink and gold. The breeze stirred gently, lifting a wind chime, rustling the late blooming roses, passing through the space where Harper used to sit. And there, caught in the dying light, was a single golden hair. Impossible, beautiful, shining like a tiny sun. I lifted it with a fingertip, feeling its weightlessness, feeling its meaning. "Harper," I whispered, "you left so much more than I realized." Peace filled me, not the peace of forgetting, the peace of remembering without breaking. He had changed me. He had healed Timothy. He had brought Ethan into my life. He had shaped a garden that would bloom long after we were all gone. I placed the hair in a glass vial, a small relic of a large life. And as the sun slipped below the horizon, I felt him everywhere, in light, in breeze, in memory, in the steady quiet of enduring love. Not gone, just transformed. Harper's legacy wasn't his toys or his collar or the fur I saved. His true legacy was the courage that held me through my darkest winter, the strength that lifted a sick boy back into the world, the comfort that filled the spaces my family had abandoned, the garden that bloomed where his paws had pressed. The new bond between Ethan and me, unexpected, steady, real, and a love that refused to end, even after breath ceased. After he died, the house should have felt empty. But it didn't, because every morning beam of sunlight, every bloom along his path, every Saturday knock on my door carried the same message. "You're not alone. I'm still with you." Harper's last winter wasn't my ending. It was my beginning, the quiet turning of a season, the gentle opening of a new life. A life shaped, softened, strengthened by a golden-hearted companion who loved without hesitation and left without leaving, always here, in light, in warmth, in what he touched, in what he changed, in what remains.